There we go. There we go. Mr. Computer finally caught up to me, Mike. Mike Klimko is on the line with us here this morning. Mike is the author of a great work. It is called, hang on here, there it is.
The Fires of Penn's Woods.
The Fires of Penn's Woods, indeed. Talking about wildfires across Pennsylvania and how Pennsylvanians responded to the challenge of them. Our conversation with Mike is brought to you by Marcus & Mack, voted best personal injury law firm in the Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Mike, good morning. Now, you're in Carlisle, and when we're talking fires of Penn's Woods, this is practically the whole state about a century and a half ago, huh?
Yes, it is. There hasn't been a county in Pennsylvania that's been immune from wildfires. Certainly some have had a worse time of it than others because of their rural character, but we've even found wildfires in Philadelphia and inside the city limits of Pittsburgh.
Well, that being the case, I should tell folks you're going to be at the Northern Appalachian Folk Festival headquarters on Philadelphia Street this Saturday. What time is the talk?
The talk is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon.
Yes.
The amount of research you had to do for this book has to be staggering, but yeah, had a heck of a lot of good material to work with, huh?
It was interesting. It all started. I was a member of the Pennsylvania Outdoor Writers, and in 2014 I was hosting the annual state convention in Shippensburg, and we're looking for topics. And a friend of mine, a firefighter, said, well, why don't you have them write about the fire that burned across South Mountain on the south side of the Cumberland Valley? And I said, great, that sounds like... And so I started doing the research on those particular fires. There wasn't just one, there were actually a lot. And I said, there's a book here, and so it went on, and I eventually produced The Fires of Penn's Woods.
Well, as the research went on, I don't know if you thought it was going to be as big a work as it ended up being. It had to be fascinating for you you could basically track the fires all across the state, couldn't you?
I could, and it was fascinating. Before I retired, I traveled a lot of the states, so a lot of the areas were familiar to me. And yeah, you could track the fires as the lumber industry moved in their slash and burn logging techniques. They would take the logs and leave the slashings, and the fires followed the axe, so to speak. Now, they thought at the time that the plow would follow the axe. But what was happening was actually the fires were burning so hot that they were destroying any topsoil, and a lot of the ground was too rocky to farm. And so the forest regenerated, and that's to our benefit today.
That's the fascinating aspect, most fascinating aspect of it to me. We're talking, 300,000 acres, would you say?
At least.
At least that much, all the way across the state of Pennsylvania. And isn't it amazing how nature is able to rebound and how small it makes man really look to be?
It is. At the time, nobody, forestry was not a science at the time. And they thought, well, once we cut the trees and they're gone, they're gone. And actually, the charcoal makers in the early iron industry in Pennsylvania, they realized that the forest would regenerate to make charcoal every 25 years. So they were really the first ones. But then you had guys like Michaud and Rothrock and Wirt that came along, and these guys were trained scientists, and they said, it doesn't have to be the way it is. And these forests will come back if we give them a chance.
Now, of course, when we're talking forests burning down, there are towns located within the boundaries of those forests as well, and they had to be very much affected. Some
towns were completely lost. The probably the largest at the time was Osceola Mills in Clearfield County. The fire had been burning out in the woods. Osceola Mill, for those that aren't familiar, is kind of in southeastern Clearfield County, and the fire had been burning up on the mountain. It's actually the Allegheny Front, and nobody thought too much of it. People didn't go out and fight the fire. And then the wind shifted, and it blew the fire into town. A few of the buildings caught fire, wooden frame buildings, and it was kind of contained, but then the fire communicated to the hardware store, and what did we have in hardware stores at the time but large amounts of black powder for use in the coal mines. And, well, that pretty much did in the rest of the town.
Yeah.
And some other towns like Carthus was partially destroyed, Cross Fork in Potter County. So, yeah, a lot of towns, these fires would come roaring out of the mountains, and there was no technology like we have today to fight them.
Were there towns that disappeared and never came back?
There were. Maston up in Lycoming County is one such example. When the logs were gone and the fires burned through, there was nothing left, and so the town just disappeared. There's another town up there, not to be confused with the town of the same name in Indiana County, but McIntyre. And it burned. But by then the mines were closed and the trees were gone. So they just kind of packed up and moved. And there's a lot of towns now that are, if you talk to people, they say, well, I live in such and such a place, or my camp usually is what they'll say. My camp's in such and such, And that's all that's left. Seasonal homes and maybe one or two residents in some of these places.
Mike Klimko is with us this morning. He's coming here to Indiana on Saturday afternoon to speak at the Northern Appalachian Folk Festival headquarters along Philadelphia Street in Indiana. Mike, when we think about the scope of all of this and the devastation that was wrought, and we think about it locally, of course, what are some of the things you're going to point out when you're here to talk to the folks on Saturday?
Surprisingly, Indiana County was largely spared for a couple reasons. One, it was heavily farmed, and when the trees were cut down, they were used locally, so it wasn't this kind of cut and run kind of thing. So Indiana County, but they have had a few. The fire on Kent Hill, I believe it was the late 30s. That's a remarkable one. And of course, Pack Saddle Gap, where the train comes through, that's burned quite a bit. I'm actually from Salzburg.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I started my firefighting career. And at the time, that was in 1971, we had this kind of gruff old assistant chief, and I mentioned forest fires one day down at the station, and he pointed a finger at me and shook it, and he said, "We don't have forest fires here. What do we have? We have brush fires." "Why do we have brush fires, not forest fires?" He said, "Because if we have forest fires, we have to call the state, and we don't want that."
It's a practical matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we had brush fires in Salzburg, but I found out all about forest fires living in Tioga County.
Well, those are some of the stories that we'll hear from Mike when he visits here in Indiana coming up on Saturday afternoon. You said 2 o'clock or 2:30?
I have 2 o'clock on my calendar.
2 o'clock.
I'm going to be there, too.
The Northern Appalachian Folk Festival headquarters on Philadelphia Street. Mike, thanks for spending a few brief moments with us this morning. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this presentation coming home for a day or so.
You betcha. You betcha. Hope you have a great trip.
Thanks.
It's Indiana in the Morning, and it's WCCS.